Hey guys, this is Evan Kokaru coming to you with another video about my life here in Japan. So I've had a lot of people mention in the comments recently that they're thinking about moving here, and just kind of asking me for general advice about where to move or kind of like how to mentally prepare for different steps of that process, right? And if I could go back 10 years, there's probably a few things that I would tell myself. If I could talk to myself and give myself some advice, there's a couple of points that I would want to kind of get across. So I wanted to talk about that in this video, and hopefully you guys find it helpful and interesting. So I think my biggest advice would be, especially 10 years ago when people were talking about moving to Japan, and if you mentioned that online or on Reddit or YouTube, whatever, there was this kind of bigger debate. It was a much bigger debate back then about what kind of foreigner you want to be when you move to Japan, right? Like, do you want to speak Japanese only when you move to Japan? Do you want to, do you want to become Japanese, quote unquote? And like, people have different opinions about that. And it was much more of a debate back then. I'm not sure why that changed. Maybe just there's a bigger influx of newer immigrants, newer foreigners to Japan. I think that probably is the reason, where back then it was much more of like focusing on the people who had lived in Japan since like the 80s, since the bubble era, and then giving advice to younger people. Now there's just a wave of younger people moving to Japan, I think. So this isn't really talked about as much, but there used to be this big discussion around this about like not getting caught in an English speaking bubble, not, making sure that you don't move to Japan and then only surround yourself with other foreigners and then actually not be able to speak Japanese. So does that happen? Well, actually, I have seen that happen a few different times, so it definitely does happen. But I think that when I first moved here, I had heard that, so I made a pretty concerted effort to make sure that I was speaking Japanese as much as possible, which was great. I mean, for my first year, I was trying to take every opportunity that I could to just go out to new places and even just go to the local izakaya, the local bar near my apartment. And I would drink with like the 50, 60-year-old, the oyajis there, that the older people that would go there and, that were like regulars. And a lot of them were like the owners of businesses, or they were really surprised that there was a foreigner there because this was kind of a seedier, I'll say seedier place in Osaka, and there weren't that many foreigners there. There definitely weren't a lot of tourists there. And it may have been the first time they had seen a foreigner in there. So, what was great about it is like, it was a great opportunity for me to pull myself out of my comfort zone and just surround myself with Japanese in that moment. And then once I went to university, I was doing things like that for my first year. And then once I went to university, I was just surrounded by Japanese people anyways. And so I really took that seriously of like trying to immerse myself completely in Japanese. And I even had days where I would say like, I'm just not going to use English today. Like I wouldn't allow myself to use any English. I would just try to do everything in Japanese, including, this is where I think I took it way too far, but including even like talking to myself in Japanese, or, taking all my notes in class in Japanese. I took that really far in the beginning, which was a good experience, but also I think maybe I could have enjoyed my first couple years in Japan a lot more if I'd had a little bit more balance in that regard. And I probably would have met more people that would have like actually led to me maybe making Japanese friends that were more in line with my actual interests right away. I made some really good friends my first few years, and actually one of my best friends is somebody I met in 2016, a year after I came here. But, a lot of the people that I was hanging out with at the beginning were like acquaintances in my classes, colleagues, different things. And, we weren't really friends because we had a mutual interest in something or that we, got along. It was more of just like, I'm inserting myself in this environment and I'm just trying to talk to as many people as possible. So that was a great experience as far as learning is concerned, but for having like a good social life and good mental health, I think I probably could have had a little bit more balance. So that would be my first point, is basically talk to everybody, be friends with everybody. You don't need to decide like what kind of foreigner you are, or like bar yourself off from doing certain things, or limit the amount of time you're speaking English. I mean, maybe I would say it's probably better if you're using more Japanese than English in the beginning, but just enjoy life and meet people and make sure you're meeting Japanese people too. And you'll have, try to be like Yes Man, like that Jim Carrey movie. Just say yes to every opportunity. And you'll find yourself doing interesting things and using Japanese anyways. So that would probably be my number one tip, as far as just moving to Japan and how to mentally prepare for that in general. Kind of something that goes along with that, I guess my number two tip would be to not get involved in any kind of online community about Japan. Again, things are pretty different now. I feel like the community in general is more positive than it used to be. But especially when I first moved here, there was a lot of I'll say posturing between foreigners in Japan about what the ideal foreigner looked like. And there was a debate on this. Is it somebody who makes a lot of money? Is it somebody who speaks the best Japanese? Is it somebody that is, just comfortably being themselves in Japan and they're not trying to be Japanese? But, there's a lot of different ways people would define that, is my point. And, because of the way Japan works and for the reasons why people came here, there was a lot of animosity in the community. For example, there were a lot of English teachers that never learned how to speak English or never learned how to speak Japanese. At the same time, there's a lot of IT people who moved to Japan who also never learned how to speak Japanese, who are making a ton of money. And so, there were a lot of people that would talk, they would talk down to people who don't speak Japanese and be like, oh, well, that's why IT or why people working in Eikaiwa are teaching English, that's why they can't get a better job because they can't speak Japanese. But then the people in IT would chime in and be like, well, I'm making 4 times your salary. What do you mean? And, then the debate would become about is it about making money or how many, or is it if you get married and you have a family here? I think the entire conversation is ridiculous. I mean, everyone's life is different, but my advice in general would be to just avoid Reddit, avoid getting involved too much in these kind of discussions online, because I think not because there isn't useful information there. And that's what's difficult about it. I find myself struggling with this. There's a lot of useful information on Reddit about immigration procedures and finding certain jobs and things like that. So it is useful at times. So I find myself just I say I'm just diving in to get information I need and I'm getting out. That's the way I think about it. Because if you get too involved in the community, what it does is not even to say anything people are saying is necessarily wrong or right, but it's what it does is it takes your sense of curiosity away from you. And it turns you into an overly analytical person who wants to prepare before they jump into the deep end, basically, before they dive into the deep end. And I think in the context of Japan, that makes it very difficult for you to do things because a lot of the times what you're doing is maybe uncharted water. It's something that hasn't been done before. There's no system designed for you. And if you try to always get some kind of answer online or get other people's opinion or have a discussion about something you think you want to do, it can paralyze you and it can stop you from doing anything. I'm looking back at what I chose to do because I dropped out of university. I went to university for a year in the US to study music. Then I decided I wanted to do international relations. So instead of just studying Japanese in the US, I decided to come to Japan. But if I had, really thinking about it, if I had gone onto Reddit or some community and I'd asked people what they thought about that, I probably would have gotten a bunch of oh, this is a terrible idea. This is not going to end well. You have no idea what you're doing. I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I figured it out, And through the process of figuring it out, I had some great experiences. I met great people and I learned how to be resourceful and learned how to problem solve for myself. And I think that there's a real danger in trying to be overly prepared all the time, especially in the online community with Japan, because people are very dismissive here. I always think of that scene in that movie, Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, where he says don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do something. People can't do something and they want to tell you that you can't do it. And I hate to say it, but I feel that statement could summarize the majority of the interactions you'll have online with other foreigners in Japan, because people tend to be very I think people have this feeling that they're not necessarily as in control of their life as they would feel. They're not as secure with their ability to control certain aspects of their life that they would be if they were living in their own home country. And I think in order to kind of cope with that, I think there's a lot of people who kind of try to become these keyboard warriors or something. I don't know. That's a cringy. Keyboard warriors is cringy, but they try to tell people what they can and can't do and take on this role as a Japan expert. And they shoot people down as a way to I think make themselves feel better, or build up their ego or something. It's a minority of people doing this, but there's a lot of them. For being a minority, there's probably on these communities and stuff, I would say there's a couple hundred people out of like 100,000, 200,000 English speaking foreigners in Japan, right? Something like that. So it's a massive minority, but they're vocal, and it can be very easy to get discouraged and not follow through with what you're trying to do, or even not even move to Japan in the first place. So try to not look up things online too much. I know it's ironic that I'm telling you this, but I mean in the context of a community where people are going to tell you directly, you're going to fail at this. Because again, people want to say that because it gives them an out to not take risks themselves or to not be doing something themselves. It's like, oh, this is impossible. So, I can say that and I feel better subconsciously even. So don't let negative people online discourage you from doing anything, and don't get too involved in these communities, because again, I think it can kill your sense of enthusiasm about things, and it can kill your sense of curiosity. And that can be dangerous, especially in Japan, because again, I've talked about this in some previous videos. One of the biggest contradictions with Japan is that this is a country of shy, introverted people that live their life within a system. And the reality of moving here as a foreigner is that you have to be extroverted. You have to make things happen. There is no system for you, usually. It's getting a little better, but there's still usually not a clear, concrete system for you as a foreigner. And, a lot of the times you need to fight for your right to do things, or for people to listen to you, or to be accepted into certain groups. And not in an aggressive way, in a polite way, but you do need to be a little bit more proactive in your life here. And I think, especially being told this is the way this is, or don't do that, or this or that, it can really mess with you. And you need to almost be a little bit naive to be able to succeed in Japan as a foreigner. You need to have optimism. And you need to move forward and be proactive. So don't give up, guys. If there's something you want to do, don't give up. Don't let anyone tell you no. And don't get too involved in that discussion in the first place. If there's something you want to do an hour of research, get some information, talk to a professional, and then make an educated decision and go for it. Don't think about it. Don't spend years in the planning phase. Go for it and do things and take action, because a lot of it's trial and error. And that really is, if you want to get better at a language, so much of it is just learning how to be comfortable with making mistakes in front of other people. That is what it is to learn a language. And, if it's not a very similar language to what you grew up with, or if you didn't study it a lot, if you're not from Europe and, really studying English in school or something, you need to put yourself out there. If you're a native English speaker learning Japanese, you're going to need to make mistakes 1,000 times to get better at Japanese. That's just the reality. So get used to that feeling, guys. Get used to that kind of uncertainty, and just dive in and try to have confidence. And don't get too involved in needing to have your, your things you're trying to do validated by people that you're talking to online, okay? At the same time, I'm going to try to give you guys the most positive, in my opinion, the most realistic take and advice based on my experience living here for 10 years. If that's something you're interested in, I would really appreciate you subscribing to the channel and liking the video. I'll be making more videos like this in the future, and I'm planning on really upping my production value once I get to, I think, around 50 videos, maybe 60 videos. So there's going to be more coming as far as just making these videos a little bit more dynamic. The content will be similar, but the visuals will be more there. So if that's something you guys are interested in, please consider supporting me and subscribing to the channel, and maybe watching one of these other videos that I have plastered somewhere around my face. Okay, thanks guys. I really appreciate you watching, and have a great day or night wherever you are. See ya.